So I never planned to work in marketing. I had no idea of what email marketing was. What actually happened was that I had an accident. I come from a fairly poor family that had like no connections, no resources really. So I was basically left at the point where I had nothing. I was forced to overcome this in a way. I'll tell you this, it's gonna sound a little bit scary, but it's true. I was starting to not sleep at all. 72 hours would pass and I would sleep like 2 hours.
Yeah, absolutely true. This is like a first-time founder disease. You can't let go. You can't really understand that it's your ego.
It's not the team that has to change, you need to change. Like the company is nothing but an extension of yourself. If you are chaotic, if you lack vision, if you lack process, why would the people that work in your company do? There's this dual weird experience that an agency owner has, which is, again, they feel that they are the best and only they can do something, and at the same time they feel that everybody around them is the problem. But it's not the problem, it's that they think that they know everything when they don't. That is the problem. If you are thinking of starting an email marketing agency and you don't have prior experience or some other sort of advantage, don't do it, because
This episode's guest is George Kapernaros, founder of YOCTO, one of Europe's top CRM marketing agencies. They were invited into Klaviyo's partner advisory council and YOTPO's email advisory board in their first year. George's team has launched over 200 e-commerce products, scaled new brands to 6 and 7 figures, and double conversion rates for 9-figure brands with millions of Klaviyo subscribers. He's also taught marketing at some of the world's most prestigious institutions and has worked with heavyweights like Kilo Health, Heights, Orbio, Mira, and more. Well, George, welcome to Big Growth Show.
thank you for having me. I should correct this. We've
Yeah.
worked with like 10-figure brands and we almost worked with an
Okay.
11-figure brand, but I actually lost the deal. I messaged you the other day, if you recall,
Yeah.
but we have like this big pitch. We
Yeah.
actually lost that, but yeah,
Uh,
almost 11-figure.
I was about to figure. Now, how do you? That's so interesting. Maybe we can talk about how you actually approach the entire idea going up market and working with such big businesses. It's always interesting to talk about that. Let's start with maybe let's go back in the day and let's try to understand what made you get into the agency space in general and what made you launch Yocto.
I stumbled into it, if I'm honest. So I'll tell you like the short version of my full professional life story because I think it all connects and it's all
Mm.
kind of interesting. So I never planned to work in marketing. I have not studied marketing. I did not study business. I had no idea of what email marketing was. What actually happened was that I had an accident way
Mm.
back. I had a spine injury right after I was basically finishing my time in the army in Greece. I was in the Air Force and
Mm.
I could not walk. Now, background, I come from a fairly poor family that had like no connections, no resources really. So I was basically left at the point where I had nothing. And all I had was the fact that I used to write good essays when was back in school. So what I did was I literally Googled how to make money writing. And I came across copywriting and I started working on like little platforms like thing like Fiverr, Upwork, like that sort of thing. And I had like some very small projects back then. Now, what happened was that I eventually had a surgery. Like I fixed my spine, I fixed my back,
Mm.
and I started working in a local Greek company while also doing freelancing on the side. And I got lucky, essentially. I landed a project with a small e-commerce startup. It's still around. It's not that small anymore, but back then it was. The name is Steve Brands, and they hired me as a copywriter to produce essentially, if I recall correctly, like a landing page copy and like some advertising copy. They were like doing drop shipping essentially.
Mm.
And I did not know this back then, but what we did together scaled quite a bit. Like they made, if I'm not mistaken, like 800,000 euros. And for them, as a small company, that
Mm.
was a lot of money back then. So what they did was like they tried to hire me full time. So I left that job that I had. I joined that company, and that company grew quite fast. Not because of me. I was just there early, basically. So I was a copywriter, then a lead copywriter, and a marketing manager and a marketing director eventually. So like before I left, from a marketing standpoint, I was kind of the, I guess, besides the two owners of the company, the highest ranking executive.
Mm.
And I left that company and I started freelancing. Now, why did I leave? I guess I left because I was disagreeing with the owners on like some things. I wanted some things to be done differently. I think it's a common thread actually among people that like do entrepreneurship. Like they feel like they can do things differently or better, etc. Actually, turns out after I made my own business, I started understanding their perspective a little bit more, and I understood why they were doing the things they were doing. But nonetheless, I started freelancing, and the agency came as a, I guess, natural byproduct of that because I started having like freelancing slash consulting gigs, and then eventually I was like, okay, listen, you can't service the demand for your services, so why don't you start like hiring people? And initially, I guess I hired people under my name. It was like the GK for George Kapernaros type of
Mm.
umbrella. But then I was like, okay, this is stupid. So like rebrand and do something that's actually having some potential to grow, and which is when I launched YOCTO. And YOCTO has been doing business, I guess, for less than 3 years for sure, but like 2.5 or something at the moment. So it's been around for a pretty short time, considering how fast we've been growing. We have around 20 people at the moment. MRR is, I don't want to say the MRR, but it's, I guess, pretty good,
Pretty
especially
good.
considering, yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we do okay, I would say, yeah.
Yeah. What does YOCTO mean? Does it stand for anything, or where
It,
does they came from?
It does. It is a unit of measure. And there is a little inside joke that for me, it's for my own personal amusement. I don't expect anybody to ever guess what it means, but there is a hidden meaning. The prime reason I chose it though is because it sounds nice and it sounds not Balkan, not Greek. It's like something that's really standing
Yeah.
out.
When you started out, did you aim to get into the more Western market like the US, UK
Yes.
market,
Yes.
yeah, or did you work on the Balkan market?
No, I did not.
No.
I've only worked, I believe, with I guess 3 companies total
Yeah.
in Greece in my life. And one I was an employee of, and two
Yeah.
was like the first freelancing gigs that I did. But basically, I almost immediately said there's no sense in doing that.
Yeah.
And I
So
just,
there's no market in Greece in this whatsoever. Like I know a couple of agencies that are also based in, well, they're based in Greece, but they've told me that the business isn't there at all.
it would be trivial to,
Mm.
I guess, dominate the
Yeah.
Greek market or even like the entire
Yeah.
region, I guess. But there's just no sense in doing that simply because the budgets are so much lower.
Mm.
So in that perspective, there's no sense in it. It's not that there's no market. There are people that do e-commerce. Actually, Greece has like a fair number of online brands, but it's just that there's no budget. So like, why would you do that? There's no sense in that.
And so, how did you go about winning your first business? Is it also connected to the fact that you've been invited to Klaviyo, to Yachtpost advisory boards? What made you stand out from, let's say, everyone else?
So those are two separate questions. So I'll
Mm.
try to answer them separately. How I acquired the first clients was through outreach. Actually, I started, of course, producing content early on, but content takes a while until it gets traction. So like the first few clients I essentially hunted for.
Mm.
So I was reaching out and I was like pitching my services, and initially you know how it goes. Like your services are less robust, your pricing is lower, you try to over deliver, sometimes you mess up, but eventually it builds up from there. So that's how I started. There's nothing fancy about it, I guess. And then when it comes to being invited on Klaviyo's advisory council or like the YOCTO thing, and actually a lot of other things that I don't talk about, I'll tell you what people tell me because
Mm.
I'm asking the same. Like, why me? Because there's bigger agencies, there's more established agencies, there's agency owners with like, I don't know, more experience and etc. So what people tell me is that what they really like about working with us is that we are much more involved into the process. In other words, we are actually invested into the partnership, give good feedback, go in depth in the feedback, do deliver great service to the clients. So I guess we try a little bit harder than most, and this
Mm,
shows. And what I've realized, which I think is quite helpful, is that it doesn't it's not so much that YOCTO has a partnership with Klaviyo, which it does, but it's also about the individuals within the company. So you have a personal relationship with somebody, and little thoughtful things like sending them a message or like wishing them well or like congratulating them on something. All of those things build momentum. Now, with Klaviyo in particular, what really helped was that I actually went to the offices that I had and I met them in person.
mm,
And I mean, I should also say this because it matters. Back then, and still actually, we were working with one of Klaviyo's, let's say, up market slash big accounts, which automatically put us in better light for Klaviyo. Like they ultimately cared more about our opinion and our business because we had more ability to impact revenue for them, right?
mm.
Because we had a pretty big project. So I think that also played a role initially for them to pay more attention to us. And I guess another thing is that I'm always very straightforward and transparent, which means that if I don't like something, I'm gonna say it like this.
You
And
are. I know it very well.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think people appreciate this because there's too
Yeah.
much BS, I guess, and too much sugarcoating. So from the tech giants' perspective, like think YOCTO, think Klaviyo, everybody's kissing their ass in a way because everybody wants to like get
Mm,
favors from them. So if you tell them openly that hey, like what you do here is like actually bad and you need to fix this, they respect you much more automatically.
mm. Yeah, makes good sense. When you talked about the customer experience and the fact why brands or clients choose you over other agencies, you say it's client experience, is how you treat them, how involved are you in the process.
So
Now,
there's quite a bit here that I want to
yeah,
unpack because I think it's
yeah,
important. So it's not just the customer experience.
mm,
The way I run the company, I guess, is very intentional. So what this means, for example, we had initially success in health and wellness. This led us to positioning ourselves in health awareness. Now I'm having conversations and I'm able to tell people, hey, we specialize in this. And these are the 5, 10 case studies that we have. And those are the 20, 30, 40 logos that we have. And then you can speak to those people and they're going to tell you we do good work. Automatically, this puts us in a much better position than an agency that does shoes and then does furniture and then does this and this and that. Because we have the specialization that will build confidence in our ability to service the client. That's one. The second thing, which in my perspective, I mean, when I launched the agency, I had no clue on how to like set things up, but I was getting feedback by other people, and I was always focused not so much on what other people do, but more on what I think is the truth of things. And one of the things that agencies used to do, which now they don't, I think, in most cases, is that they had a QA specialist, as an example, which it's totally dumb, in my opinion, because if you have a QA specialist, what it means is that automatically you don't need people to be checking their work because that other person is going to check. So I said, no, we're never going to do this. And we need to keep ourselves to a high standard and actually check the work ourselves. And yes, mistakes are going to happen. But then when you make a mistake, then you are going to need to record the loom of you going through the process 10 times, and then you won't make the mistake anymore. So I was always very much focused on doing things that matter and not doing things that are stupid. And this has led to us making choices like having no customer success team, which again is another common thing that agencies have. They have somebody that's doing the work, but you actually talk to somebody else that doesn't really understand the work,
mm,
which again is stupid because they can't really communicate with you in an intelligent way. And it's perhaps they sound nice or even they look nice, but then you enter the call and you leave the call and you have no clue what you agreed to, or they have no clue what you agreed to.
mm,
So we don't do that. So in specialization, it's that you speak directly to the people doing the work. It's that we have, and especially in the last period of the agency, we have been very much focused on strategy development, not just execution work. The way most agencies in our space work is that they have this audit process that essentially diagnoses the issues that you have as an agency, but then basically they have the same playbook they apply. So they may say, you like this, you like this, you like this. Here's the playbook. We install the playbook. 3 months pass, the playbook is installed, and now what do? We just send a few emails per month, and we collect the same retainer we collected in the past. That's BS for the client because the value goes down over time, but the cost
Right.
remains flat. There's no sense in that. So what we do instead of that is that we work in, I guess you could call them sprints that happen every 2 weeks. There's a cadence to our execution, which means that things are always happening and there's no place after which we say we installed the playbook and now we chill and just send campaigns. This is not happening. And we have quarterly roadmaps also. And to produce those quarterly roadmaps, we speak to the clients and actually try to align on what matters to them as a business. And because we tend to work with larger companies, they tend to have a sense of what matters to them. Not always, to be honest, but most of the cases, which allows us ultimately to be driving results that they can speak to their CEO about or their CFO about. And like actually there's alignment that, okay, this agency does something meaningful. It's not just the guys that design pretty emails. So
There's a lot to unpack. The first thing is how you go about operationalizing, let's put it that way, strategy, right? And we are very much on the same page with you when it comes to like structuring teams. You know, Christine and I, we are very much on the same page when it comes to putting strategists for client facing roles, because it doesn't make sense to put an account manager, to hire an account manager who doesn't know anything about contextually about the client's business
of course
and the
it's stupid.
strategy to, maybe it makes sense when you're, as an agency, you work just only with enterprise level clients, and you hire an account manager to manage politics. But from a, when you work with scale ups, for the most part, they need a direct input on what good looks like and what it is that they need to do in next
Yes.
quarter or this year. The first question: how do you find good strategists? And what is it that you do to train them internally or help them own the process, own the strategy, and also kind of communicate that maybe to the rest of the team?
It's such a good question. And it's such a tough thing. I think it's probably the number one toughest thing that you can deal with as an agency, like finding good people. And I'll tell you what my conclusion is. It's entirely possible that I'm wrong in this, but it is my conclusion so far. It's difficult to find experienced people that will truly match what you want, because in most cases they will have a lot of baggage. Maybe they worked somewhere that did things differently, maybe they had a bad experience with another agency that affected them, etc. So what we try to do is develop and promote within. In other words, what we and I will tell you all our process because it's quite specific. What we want to do and the way we're structured is that there's, okay, I'll tell you the full thing because I guess it might be interesting. So the pod
Yeah, of course.
structure is basically strategist, coordinator, copywriter, and designer. And the purpose of the coordinator is to become a strategist. The reason why they want to become a strategist is because strategists get performance bonuses that are significantly larger than the coordinators. And the performance bonuses are given when the agency exceeds certain targets that it has profitability wise. The surplus essentially is shared between the agency and the team, and the strategist gets the majority of it. So coordinators are incentivized eventually to become strategists. So what we actually look for is intelligence and somebody that doesn't flinch when you tell them that it's going to be extremely hard. Those are the two things. And what I do specifically, we have this whole process like top grading. Maybe you know it's like there's a whole thing that you follow a certain structure, etc. And at the last part, you do like a cultural alignment type of interview. And what I want to do always is I want to scare them. That's what I'm actively trying to scare them. I'm telling them it's going to be super difficult. You won't be enough. You won't make it. Like I try to scare them. And I want people that don't flinch. If they
Mm.
even push back a little bit, it's not a fit, because I want people that are going to be like, I'm going to make it. And of course, you have to have some experienced people. Like, for example, our director of client services, Maria, she has like 10 years of experience, right? Which is powerful because he's helping those people learn faster. But the true, I guess, advantage of this agency is that it creates strong people, or at least it reveals them, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And we develop them quite fast.
Have you felt pressured by needing to make a hire, a senior hire or a strategist,
Yes, I have.
and meanwhile trying to balance and find, not to compromise on what you just explained?
I have, and I have made a lot of mistakes when it comes to hiring. So it's one of the biggest problems that you can have as an agency. One of the big mistakes that I think I used to do in the past when it comes to this was that I was planning things based on the number of clients. So I would say, for example, a strategist can work with 5 brands, and a copywriter with X, etc. And then I would say, okay, we need to hire somebody based on the number of brands. But the reality of it is that what brand means is very different. There's brands that are easy to work with, brands that are hard to work with. So what we started doing is, instead of actually like tracking number of brands, which can lead you to make bad decisions because the work becomes very unequal, we are starting to track things like units that we deliver to the clients. And then on top of this, what I call lost productivity. So basically, number of revisions or ad hoc requests that are outside the roadmap. And then based off of this, you can get a sense of the drainage really that the projects have. And then it allows you to predict, if you will, how many people you will require much more effectively than just like a blank number of clients.
Is there somebody who is responsible for tracking these KPIs? Let's say how many revisions happen outside of the roadmap,
The coordinators do.
the coordinates, and so they own these KPIs. How, at what point you decide to say, okay, this particular person who is a coordinator is ready to transition into strategist, and like at what point you decide that, and what happens after? Let's say they're ready to do strategy. Do you give them additional training, or
There is
how?
training, yes.
Yeah,
There
this
is.
training.
So in regards to training, there's three trainings, not three types of trainings really.
Mm,
So there's a structured training that, like, there's like, I don't know, like 12 weeks of material that you have to go through as a coordinator, because those are kind of the fundamentals of what you need to know. And then on top of this, we do internal knowledge sharing. So for example, one of the ones that we're going to do like in the next few days is related to subscriptions, because some strategists have much much more focus on subscriptions than others, and they're going to share what they learn about subscriptions with everybody else. And coordinators participate to this as well. And then the third type of training, which is, I guess, more close to what you're after, is when they are almost ready, let's say 80% there. What we do is that you, and I mean, I have done this myself in the past. What you do is that you essentially, at least that's how I think about it, you become like an invisible net around them, but then you like push them and they have to swim. So
mm,
like that's how I do. So for example, you would have, and of course this requires having processes that they can follow, of course, right? So you have the strategy development process, and they start working on it, and you are always there to step in and help in case they need help, but they need to go through it and do it themselves. And then while they do this, you tell them, hey, like, this is not the way it should be, and this is how you could perhaps do it differently and how it can improve. And I guess this trial by fire, if you will, is what ultimately gets people to wake up and learn how to do
yeah.
something quickly.
You also spoke about client management, client experience overall. How do you design? How do you go about, let's say, treating clients that let's say want your presence? And have you had a lot of cases when clients requesting your presence and you've been involved in the strategy, and
Yes.
well, it's from a business perspective, it's not the best time of the best investments of your time.
It used to happen at
Mm.
home, but to be honest with you, it used to happen at home because of me, because I was afraid to let go. And because like my strategists or my team as a whole would say something, I would say, okay, but maybe we do this also. And then I would intervene. And then of course, if you intervene, the client is going to be kind of expecting you to be around. So what I do now, and I highly recommend that people do this because it's better for the client and it's better for you, is that I invite the team to the final stages of the sales process
Mm.
so that they meet the people they will work with. And I'm being very upfront that, hey, they are going to be leading the account, not me. And what this does is that, like, if, like, it hasn't ever happened, but imagine that it would happen. They could tell me, hey, I don't want to work with this person. If that would be a good thing if it happened. Or on a more positive type of direction, the person that is within my company, they get the context and they
Mm.
are able to kind of be much more prepared from the get-go on what they have to do because they don't miss any information during the sales process. And I mean, we do internal calls before the kickoff also to save this information. So there's another process there,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that is quite helpful.
Uh,
So in terms of people like kind of like demanding me to do something, etc., we had some of these, but again, a lot of it has to do with how you carry yourself.
mm.
If you make yourself too available, like I'll tell you something that I think is going to be very instructive. So I had a project where we were delivering something that was quite limited and very specific, essentially just content. There was no
Yeah.
strategy component because they had an internal team, etc. And my naive thought was that we could take this and stack other things on top of this and make it a better experience for the client. So I would instruct my people to be more involved. I would even get involved myself, etc. And then eventually I had a discussion with a client and he told me like, actually, you know what, this is good, but we don't really care about this. What we care is the content. And you realize that, do I really need to be involved or do we really need to be doing all of this? Like what actually matters to the client? And this was such a big learning to me that we are now in the process of doing this for all of our projects, like to truly understand what are good to haves, what are must haves, and where are we just wasting time. Because unless you do this, then it's not just that you make less money, which you do, you're also making it harder for your team to kind of like function in the
To
company.
execute.
And that, yeah,
Yeah.
they're like, they don't know what they should be doing as much.
I just want to take you back a little bit when you spoke about the difficulty of letting go. How did you overcome that?
I'm the worst at this. How did I overcome this? I was forced to overcome this in a way because I was getting burned out. I was. I'll tell you this. It's gonna sound a little bit scary, but it's true. I was starting to not sleep at all. So like 72 hours would pass, and I would sleep like 2 hours because
Mm.
not of something real, but because I was just thinking about what could go wrong, which is totally irrational, obviously, right? So I was getting a little bit sick of being sick, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to be doing this. And I decided not to, and then nothing happened. And you also learn to make smarter decisions when you hire people. Because, I mean, what I think I wrote about this on LinkedIn recently, I think what everybody doesn't say when they say, oh, I scaled my agency or I scaled my brand, is that, like, you need to have smart people also. Unless you have smart people,
Yeah.
pretty hard to succeed. So you learn to trust the people that you hire also.
Yeah. It's a very wise point. We talk about it quite a lot as well internally, but also when we meet agencies. And one of the biggest bottlenecks for those who are sub sub 1 million, I mean, maybe 30, 60K, whatever MRR, maybe even less, is letting go. Letting go is turning yourself, is transitioning from being a technician, a
Yeah.
delivery man, delivery woman, whatever, into somebody who actually leads the business and leads the team.
But,
And
but can I speak to that? Because I
mm,
mean, I have felt this way and I have very strong thoughts. I think the thought there is something along the lines of, I can do it better. I
mm,
know how to do it better. And unless I do it, it won't be done well. But what is difficult to accept at that level is that you're not that good, actually. And that's why you are that small. And you need to get better, not like you can't keep doing what you do. You need to get better. And what does being better mean? It means a very simple thing. You need to be focusing more and doing things that are more valuable. That's what it means. And unless you understand that you tweaking with the design or you tweaking with the copy is not meaningful enough in the grand scheme of things, and unless you learn to say, and I mean, I have told you this, I have nothing but respect for you and like Christina and what the work that you do, but there's a lot of BS around in terms of like the watch this YouTube video or this course or download that, and unless you stop wasting time with all of that and frankly just get your ass to do some outreach, get your ass to like create a better process or hire some people or have higher standards, you're always going to be stuck there. And in saying this, I also want to say that there's nothing stuck about earning 30K a month. I think we're sometimes too tough on ourselves. Only 30K. Come on, like who earns 30K? Like in my
mm,
country, people earn like 900 euros per month and they're happy.
mm.
So to earn 30K, you are still doing better than most. So there's also that element, which I think a lot of people go through is this self-hating process where they compare themselves to, I don't know, like Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, and they're like, oh, what am I doing with my 400K net per year? And I'm like useless. But actually, it's 400K net per year. And like, you're being stupid. And you need to learn to love yourself also a little bit more. Not even love, but like just accept yourself that you are young, probably. You have a lot to learn, and that's okay. And there's people that are further ahead of you, but they're further ahead of you. Why? Because they've been doing it longer, because they got in early, because they got lucky in many cases. And you shouldn't be tying your self worth to that arbitrary metric. As long as you have food to put on the table and people around you that love you, that's more than enough to be happy, I guess.
You know, sometimes we get asked about how other email agencies or how other agencies perform or do in relation to the agencies, the founders that ask us how Roman, can you tell us like how where we are, how we're doing?
I asked you too, I think.
Yeah, and everyone's asking, and some people is even asking like, Roman, George, Adam, you also know, Mike from No Limit. How how do they get there? How am I close to that? And and it always like, dude, they've just been longer in the game than you are. They've been just doing it for way longer than you do. So it's always funny to hear about that.
And
Um,
just to speak about me in particular, because I mean, I guess I'm the main topic of today's episode. Like for me, it's deceptive to say YOCTO is around for 2.5 years because I was a marketing director for an eight-figure company before, right? Like for years. And then I was consulting. It's not that I started from zero. So I had, I guess, an advantage over most people.
yeah,
So in that sense, totally. And again, don't be too hard on yourself is, I guess, the main takeaway.
very very wise. What's been the toughest, maybe the hardest, most challenging operational problem or challenge that you had to overcome with the agency?
I'm not an operations person. I'll start like this, which means that it's very likely that we have problems that I don't even know we have. I'll put it like that. The big challenge when it comes to operations has been that I avoid doing operations work. And I have tried at least 3, 4 times in the past to get somebody else to do it for me. Like you hired a project manager, or like, I don't know, like, and they're gonna do it. They're gonna fix ClickUp, and we're gonna be okay if they do it. But it never works, at least from what I've experienced. So avoiding it has been the biggest problem, and I avoid it because I hate it. Frankly, it's not something that I enjoy. But when I actually do sit down and work on things, I don't really like. I mean, I think I've told you this too in the past. I think I have more context than anybody else in the company, and more context than anybody else could have about the company. So I'm singularly well positioned to fix operational problems, which again is why I think I'm effective at it when I actually sit down and do it. But I avoid it, so there's that. So there's always room to improve, I guess.
Do you have second in command? Somebody who's
Second
responsible
in
for the ops?
command, officially, I do not, but I would consider two people in the company. One is, of course, Maria, and one is one of my strategists that may not be the most experienced, but they've been around the longest. So they have, again, a lot of context.
How do you go about making decisions within the business, major decisions, let's say growing or
Yeah.
becoming more lean or hiring other people? Do you have a consult with your team, or what's your approach?
I'm going to answer, but I'm going to give a long answer because,
Mm,
again, I think it's interesting. What I used to do was I would have essentially some KPIs that we have as a company that we track weekly. And those would be, I don't know, including client health. They would include some marketing related ones, but we would be reviewing this weekly together. And then based off of this, we would say we're doing well, we're not doing well. On top of this, I had what I used to call rocks, which people might be familiar with. It's like quarterly projects, basically. And what I used to do was that all of what I just said, I was setting myself. I would say, these are the rocks, these are the KPIs, and then we would basically review on a weekly cadence together. Now, this didn't work because in my assessment, nobody cared really. And why did they not care? Because I was setting the strategy and setting the rocks myself, and basically told them, okay, now you need to do this, without really having buy-in from them or even making them understand why it's so important. So what we did at the beginning of, not the beginning, at the end of last year actually, was that we did a very long strategy session together where I did the following. And I'm happy to share the entire thing because again, I think it's interesting. I had done an initial brainstorming on what I see in terms of trends in the industry, where I think we should play as a company, why we should do this, and how we could potentially do this. And of course, I had some sort of structure to this to guide the discussion, like what can we do when it comes to people, when it comes to strategy, when it comes to execution, to cast. This is from scaling up, which is like a methodology. But I basically invited people to brainstorm together with me. And out of this, we created the priorities for the coming months. And what actually happened was that we're now finishing the first quarter and we have like almost 100% completion rate on all of the goals that we set, which is like not where we were before I did that. And the main key difference in my perspective is that it's not me in my ivory tower telling people this is what has to happen, but I actually took the time to explain to people, and not just what are the priorities and like why we do them, but also how are we going to communicate this. Like this is our narrative, and this is why we should push this.
mm,
And I don't know if you have noticed, or if anybody that follows Planning has noticed, if you see the content that I've been posting in the past, it was basically me pulling things out of my ass. Like
yeah.
whatever I was thinking about, I would write about. Now it's much more specific, and it all goes around this idea of the retention clarity gap, which basically means that the true problem companies have is not so much that they don't do enough emails, but they don't know what works and what actually drives the results. So the content and the communication is geared around that. And it's not just the communication, it's also things we do internally to kind of become more capable when it comes to this, so that we can then justify the marketing message with the service we deliver. So
Mm.
co-creation, I guess, has been the key for me, not just telling people you need to do this and you need to do that, but also involving them in the process and making them ultimately feel part of it. And this whole being a part of it thing, I think it's a very big issue that I see in other agencies, because I do speak to people that work in other agencies that sometimes want to leave that other agency and work in mine. And the most common thing I hear is that they feel they do not really contribute to where the agency is going, and they basically just get paid to do something, but then they don't care. And there's not a single person in my company that doesn't care at the moment. There's not a single
Mm.
person. And this is not accidental, it is because I treat them like adults. And I expect them to be adults. And if they're not adults, I will call them out on it.
The reason, that's what I see. The reason why most agencies and teams don't know where they're heading is because the leadership teams or the founders don't know where they're heading themselves,
Yeah.
or they may, if they know, it is strictly forbidden for everyone else to know. It's like there is that clarity gap that you talk about. Yeah, the biggest, or one of the biggest issues, if not the biggest one, is misalignment. When we talk about misalignments, and it may sound like a subjective, a very soft thing, like you can't really put a KPI on it. Well, you can when you start digging deeper into what makes up alignment or misalignment. That clarity gap is, founders just don't care. They don't decide they don't care. They don't know that they need to care about how clearly they communicate what it is they do and where they're heading as an agency to the rest of the team.
But, but,
And
but, but why does this happen? I think there's a reason why this
mm,
happens. It happens because the barrier to entry in agencies is actually quite low. Like
yeah,
everybody can start an agency. And there's people like me, and I think yourself, that we were tough and we were smart and we kind of like made it. But we didn't start with, at least I did not start with like the best education or like the most
mm,
experience, etc. And it's very important for people to become self-aware and say that it's not that my team is bad. And that's what everybody says, like the team is bad, they don't do this, etc. And I have even said it myself. But it's not the team that is bad, it's you who is not a good enough leader to, first of all, acquire a strong team, develop the team that you have, and ultimately unite them under a common sense of purpose. It's not the team that has to change. You need to change. Like the company is nothing but an extension of yourself, at least when it's at the size that we are at the moment. Maybe if it has like 200 people, then it won't be anymore. But at the moment, it's simply an extension of who we are as people. And if you are chaotic, if you lack vision, if you lack process, why would the people that work in your company do? If you don't have high standards, why would they? If you don't do what you say you will, why would they? If you are making promises that you don't deliver, why would they? And I could go on. So there's this dual weird experience that an agency owner has, which is again simultaneously, at least a small agency owner, they feel that they are the best and only they can do something, and at the same time they feel that everybody around them is the problem. But it's not the problem, it's that they think that they know everything when they don't. That is the problem.
yeah,
I'm sorry for being
yeah.
tough, but I mean it's
It
just
is.
the
It is what it
truth.
is. Yeah, absolutely true. It says like a first-time founder, the first-time founder disease.
Yes,
You can't let go. You can't. You can't really understand that it's your ego. I've been there too. We've all been there.
I have two,
It's
by the way.
yeah. It's we talk about mindset, and which is the term that in the word that has been decimated. It's been, it's been so much overused that people don't even when you put, well, there is another term for it. When you hear or see a particular term or see a thing for so many times that you stop paying attention to it. That's the case with the mindset and that transition that people need to make, founders need to make, about how they see themselves and how they see their business.
I used to think that the word mindset was dirty and it's like BS, and it's like,
Mm.
actually, honestly, I think. what most people lack is faith in themselves to perform. It's not skills, it's not intelligence, it's not work, it's just faith in themselves. It's mindset ultimately. And what I've realized, and I read it in a book, and I read it and then I realized that this is something that I knew instinctively, is that how you feel about things and how you think about things and how you ultimately behave about things affects how others do as well. So, for example, an easy example is that if you tell somebody you love them, they feel a certain way, which causes them to behave in a certain way, which causes you to love them more, which causes them to behave in a certain way. And similarly, if you believe in yourself and if you believe in people, they start to believe in you and believe in themselves more. So it becomes
Contagious. Yeah.
contagious, exactly. And I think this is another element of why YOCTO and why, I mean, I guess I have been relatively successful in a relatively short time. I have no concept of reality whatsoever. I'm completely delusional when it comes to some things. Like I'm very much always positive at the end of things. I can be angry or negative, etc. at the short term, but like long term and background wise, I'm always 1,000% sure that I will succeed. And I think people see this, and then maybe they don't believe in themselves, but they believe in me, who believes in them, and
Yeah.
that keeps them kind of
Going.
going there.
Yeah. It's a great concept, and I think I've also read it and heard it somewhere on YouTube that successful entrepreneurs, one of the most common denominators or patterns is a long-term positive outlook on life, on general speaking, on outcomes, like these unbelievable faith. It's not even like it's an unbelievable faith. It's just by default you believe in something so much that it becomes contagious to everyone else. And I've done quite a bit of thinking on that too. That anything to do with self belief, faith comes down to self esteem and to your upbringing and to all the mental difficulties or mental issues or all of the stress that we experience as kids that is being passed on to the adult age. And then if you haven't dealt with that, or you at least haven't done some sort of semi-therapeutical coaching slash work or just personal development, it is very, 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 very difficult to weed out what's the reason behind the lack of self-esteem or lack of self-belief. So it's a very interesting topic.
And to be entirely honest with you, I had a very rough childhood also. Like my father, he has passed away. He had like mental health issues. My mother was an orphan. I grew up poor. Like there's been a lot of rough things that have happened to me, and I have done a lot of psychotherapy. It's not that I like magically like
Mm.
fix them or anything, but it really does all go back to childhood. And I think the positive thing about having a difficult life is that if you become self aware of what you've been through, it also proves to you that you can go through it, which gives you confidence. And I think for me, ultimately, again, other people have had it way worse than me, but I haven't had it easy either. So I'm not lucky to have had a rough childhood, but I'm lucky to have found a way to program myself to think about it as something positive and something that has made me stronger.
Mm. Yes, I think that's something that I resonate with. We can talk about that for quite a long time. How do you? Let's switch completely the topic because I'm also a little bit aware of the time. I wanna sneak peek on AI automation, the future of agency business. We also happen to talk about AI a lot internally and trying to figure out what would be the most practical or the most useful thing that we could build internally and potentially also roll it out to agencies. What's your overall vision? What it is that you're working on, maybe internally, any
Yeah.
AI applications? How do you go about it?
Do you want me to talk about this in the context of agencies broadly or email marketing agencies specifically?
Whichever is the most, I would say, practical, whichever is that you've got the most experience with.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, probably even marketing them. So I would say if you are thinking of starting an email marketing agency and you don't have prior experience or some other sort of advantage, don't do it, because you will be getting wiped out fairly quickly before you become proficient and knowledgeable enough to be able to kind of deal with what I call the service market fit collapse that AI creates. And what I mean by that is that essentially AI accelerates things. You can produce more content quicker, and you can soon read data more quickly and do things faster and better and cheaper, etc. So what this does is that it changes the expectations of the people that hire you for your service, which automatically means that unless you do something exceptional or can do something exceptional, there's no real need for them to be paying you. You will always have some people that want somebody else to handle it for them, or people that will resist using AI, will want a human touch. And yeah, I'm not suggesting that agencies are going to be wiped out fully. I think this is naive to think, but the market, I think, will shrink, and I think there will be greater demand for people that can do more strategic work, which is actually why we are more focused on like the retention clarity gap and how we can consult companies to close it, and how we can have better roadmaps, and how we can ultimately communicate our impact and create alignment within companies more. It's less about press this button or that button on Klaviyo, and it's more about actually affecting the organization you work with. So I think, broadly speaking, it is a very big risk, and it's gonna wipe out a lot. I mean, in fact, it has already wiped out a lot of people, frankly. I know of many people that tell me I don't use copywriters anymore. We still do, and I think we will continue to do, because our brands have specific tone of voice requirements, but that are like more difficult to nail with AI. But yeah, it's a big disruptor. And in terms of what we do internally, we do two things. We're actually in two different stages, I would say. That's how I would describe. We have some parts that have been augmented with AI. In other words, there is documentation for how can you take something that would take you 10 hours, and with this documentation you can do it in two. We have some of that. And now we're actually working with an AI, I guess, agency, AI automation agency, however you want to call this, to truly make some things automated. Essentially, like, think of a path where you fill out the form, and then automatically you have deliverables ready after you fill the form, because agents do the work after. I
Yeah.
don't know if we will succeed, but my vision is that we will be investing on this basically throughout the year. And my goal is to streamline as much as possible the planning process of things, because if you have correct inputs, you can have correct outputs when it comes to planning. And as much as possible, the pattern recognition. So, as an example of what I mean by that, if you take a piece of content like text, images, etc., you
Mm.
can, as a human, try to understand what makes it successful or not, but you are always going to be worse than AI at recognizing the patterns, because the AI just can simply see the patterns better than you do. So this is another example where it could be totally and fully automated. Imagine a workflow where you upload a bunch of screenshots, and automatically you have an analysis for how can you actually iterate on the content in a more successful way, and why, and what goes wrong in that particular instance, and what could be done instead. So that is another area where we want to be focusing. We won't try to create our own AI products, which other people do. We want to use internally only. And we're, of course, very happy to use other people's products, because I know some people do great work on this. But yeah, that's more or less how I feel about AI. I think it is it is one of those things that makes me a little bit sad sometimes,
Mm.
because I sometimes feel I should perhaps be building a business directly related to AI. I think the wave is having much more momentum than what I'm currently doing. But going back to what I said earlier, you also need to be kind of accepting the choices you've made and kind of be
Mm,
happy with them also, not like because there's always going to be the next best thing, and if you keep chasing things, you're
mm.
never going to be fulfilled in the end.
So interesting because I'm thinking about this quite often as well lately. Are we making the right choice when it comes to AI implementation? Should we be building something that is AI driven? But then I read an interesting post by or this famous B2B marketer, one of the top voices on B2B marketing, B2B demand generation. What's his
Chris
name?
Walker.
Yeah, Chris Walker. He talked about that quite a lot. He said that he's building an agency or in a consulting firm, but consulting firm will be powered by AI. Consulting will never go away. He believes that consulting will stay, but it needs to be exceptionally well delivered. You need to know what your problem you're solving. However, your internal AI products will basically help you deliver consulting in a much more effective, efficient, more profitable way for your clients. And when I read that, I was like, yeah, maybe that's also partially a good move because what you're actually doing, you're making AI a part of your offer. If you do it the right way, do it the effective way, you're helping yourself to help your clients.
I mean, this is, I think, a good analysis. But my question is to Chris: is what will happen 50 years from now? Because
Hmm.
if you no longer need junior consultants, because the junior work can be done with AI, the old consultants are eventually going to die, and then you
Hmm.
have no consultancy. So it's difficult to predict what happens long term. But
Yeah.
I think nobody knows really, so I try not to worry about this.
Yeah. True. True. The last question: what's the future for YOCTO? Where do you see yourself in the next? Well, let's put it that way: 3 to 5 years.
I see myself as still, I will probably still work. I don't think I'm gonna sell and retire or anything along
Mm.
those lines, but I will likely prepare the company for an exit just so that I have the option of an exit if I want to. And what I actually want to do, and I guess this is the first time I'm speaking about this like in a recorded setting, is I want to start more companies. And I want those companies to be focused less so on marketing, but more so on the support functions that make a company work, like recruitment, development of talent, remote operations, sales, like all of those things that every company requires to function, basically. And my idea, I mean, this might age poorly, but my idea is that it will all be under the YOCTO umbrella. There will be the YOCTO agency, then YOCTO people, YOCTO sales, YOCTO whatever, and
Mm.
then those will be synergistic with each other. And if you ask, like, why is it this the smartest or the quickest way to be wealthy? Probably no, but I find it interesting, so that's why I will.
Love it. Yeah, definitely an interesting vision. Great, George. Thank you so much. It's been definitely an insightful conversation. I definitely see, the more I do similar interviews with quote unquote high performance agencies, I see the more difference I see between those who succeed and those who are, let's put it that way, on the path of success, trying to succeed. So thank you much for your time. It's been very good.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you, and it was a great conversation.